First of all, though, and you know that this is what people are talking about, I want you to look at a photograph. I want you to look at this photograph. The President of the United States, the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France, and for the United Kingdom, your predecessor, David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary. How do you feel when you look at that photo of D-Day at Omaha Beach?
Well, the last thing that I wanted to do was cause anyone any hurt or offence or upset, which is why I apologised unreservedly for the mistake that I made. And I can only ask that I hope people can find it within their hearts to forgive me, and also look at my actions as Prime Minister to increase investment in our armed forces, to support our armed forces, but also to ensure that veterans have a minister sitting around the cabinet table with unprecedented support to make this the best country in the world to be a veteran, as a demonstration of how deeply I care about this community.
What about all the homeless veterans? What about all the veterans on crappy welfare payments? I mean, of course, it shouldn't necessarily just be veterans who get access to these things. This should be kind of a base standard that we ensure that nobody goes homeless and no one is eating from food banks. But veterans are also ones who are eating from these things. And I know that there is a kind of large consensus that somehow veterans are worth more than everybody else in this country, which I disagree with. But nevertheless, even through that kind of right-wing prism, you've already failed veterans, Rishi. So I don't think you really have many legs to stand on. Again, of course, as with many of these are problems inherited from George Osborne. But even so, like, you are still representing the party of George Osborne here, so...
And what they've done for our country.
So you said it was a mistake, and you've apologised. And then a few days later you went further and said, as you just have, that you hope people could forgive you. Do you understand that for quite a lot of people watching, I think, they simply think that the basic duty of the Prime Minister, the duty, was for you to be in that photograph and not David Cameron?
Well, that's why I've apologised unreservedly for the mistake, and I hope people can find it in their hearts to forgive me. My duty is also to make sure that this is a country which looks after our veterans, which is why I'm proud that there is a Veterans Minister sitting around the cabinet table, a dedicated office for Veterans Affairs with more support for our veterans, because I care very deeply about their well-being and making sure that we repay to them the debt of gratitude we owe for everything that they've done for our country.
People have heard what you've said, and you've said it a couple of times. Nigel Farage has said he thinks you don't understand, you don't care about what he called our culture, what he called our history.
It's obvious he didn't want to be there. What's to forgive? I mean, yeah, like, exactly, like, you know, you should be apologising for the fact that clearly you had made an executive decision that this was less important to you than a pre-recorded interview with ITV. This isn't about, like, this wasn't like a mistake. This wasn't something that you've done absent-mindedly. This was a choice that showed your priorities. And no amount of apology, no amount of being remorseful can absolve you of essentially showing everybody where your priorities really and truly lie.
So that you were not basically patriotic. Is he playing with fire by bringing your heritage into this argument?
Well, Nigel Farage can answer what he exactly meant by those comments. I'm not going to get involved in that because I don't think it's good for our country or good for our politics. Now, obviously, I disagree with him. And when it comes specifically to our armed forces, again, people can judge me by my actions. I'm someone who...
Of course, it's not about your armed forces. It's about you and your relationship with him. And it's clear you don't want to talk very much about him. You want to talk, and we will, about the choice between you and Keir Starmer. The problem with that is that Nigel Farage has destroyed David Cameron's premiership. He helped bring down Theresa May, and he's now coming for you. And isn't your problem that many Conservatives think he's more of a Conservative than you are?
Well, at the end of the day, on July 5th, there is only going to be one person that's Prime Minister.
But I'm asking about Nigel Farage.
Well, and I'm answering a question. So the choice for everybody, there's only going to be one of two people who's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer or myself. A vote for anyone who's not a Conservative candidate is just make it more likely that Keir Starmer is that person. So if you are someone...
Never apologised for the real problem, though, which was austerity, because it's fine to destroy disabled people's lives. Well, exactly, yeah, absolutely. All of this comes down to austerity at the end of the day anyway. It's just incredible that they can say how much they care about veterans, when essentially their approach to disabled veterans, to homeless veterans, to hungry veterans, to veterans in poverty has essentially just been pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's just weird that that argument is only salient in our culture when it comes to veterans, when of course that's the rhetoric they use to everybody who deals with those problems. And I think that whether you're a veteran or not, the state should help you if you're in poverty. It should help you if you're homeless. It should help you if you're going to a food bank. It should help you if you're disabled, veteran or not.
Literally a communist.
Veteran or not, of course. I mean, veterans definitely have served the country in a way that means that they also definitely do deserve it. But the idea that should be precluded from others because they haven't done so is a silly argument. You're right, Seraphic Beam, how you doing?
You say, what makes a conservative? If you're someone who wants lower taxes, if you want your pension protected, if you want migration reduced, if you want a sensible approach to net zero that prioritises our security.
Fucking neoliberalism.
I don't think, Rishi, that you can say that as a conservative, you can be trusted to lower taxes because taxes are still going up. Again, as a failure of neoliberal policy, I have explained it on stream before that if you get rid of all of these revenue streams for the government and those market failures in those inelastic markets require the state to subsidise the consumer to pay for the additional money that's being spent into private sector profits, that means less revenue for the government overall and more taxes have to be raised. For example, it's far more expensive paying housing benefit to private landlords than owning the council housing assets and being able to be the one getting the rental payments. So, just another way in which the neoliberal turn has completely hemorrhaged money out of the state and caused taxes to increase. And on top of that, you're the one who's caused immigration to go up. Necessary reasons in terms of legal migration, of course, but you did lie when you tried to get elected on a platform of reducing it, so you can't even say that. And you promised to stop the boats, but your refusal to properly understand the necessity of holding true the Refugee Convention has meant that we've spent all of this time fussing around a supposed deterrent rather than opening up safe and legal routes, which would stop the boats. So you've failed on literally everything. Like, you're running on a electoral platform of, I know we failed on literally all of these conservative buzz phrases and special interest issues for the past 14 years. I promise if you give us 5 more years, we'll fix all of the problems that we created.
Security and reducing people's bills. That's what I will offer you in this
So you weren't
election.
talking about Nigel Farage at all. You see, a lot of people looking at him and you, they think, these Conservatives, that he's a kind of Sunday roast with all the trimmings and you're a quinoa salad.
Well, I think the policies are what matter. The substance is what matter, Nick. So I know we're going to get into it, but you're asking me about personalities.
You also got to judge people on their record as well, though. I mean, the policies are also kind of small fry in comparison to Reform UK. Of course, you're chasing after kind of different voter bases, but of course, Reform UK don't have any record that people can judge. You have 14 years of failure that everybody is judging right now.
I'm asking you about Nigel Farage, and people are noting you don't want to talk about him, so let's talk about policy.
Nick,
if you don't want to talk about him.
it's not that I'm not willing. I'm willing to talk about everything here, but the simple issue here is a vote for anyone else, including Nigel Farage's party, and I would make the same point about anyone's party, right, is ultimately a vote that makes it more likely that Keir Starmer is in power. And you said to me, well, are you a Conservative enough? Well, here's what we're offering. Lower taxes, protected pensions, increase in defence spending, a more sensible approach to net zero, and a clear plan to both stop the boats.
I mean, your protection for pensions is protecting them from the taxes that you put up. Pensions have always been taxable income. It just so happens that your continuation of fiscal drag has pushed pensioners into the point where they would start paying tax. That's your fault, Rishi. You could have stopped fiscal drag at any time, say for example by raising taxes on the rich, but you haven't done it.
And bring down the levels of migration. That is what I'm talking to the country about.
Well, let's talk about it now.
For people.
Let's talk about it now. Now, let's talk about policy, promises, plans. People you once said don't want politicians who promise the earth and then fail to deliver. So I want to take you through some of your promises. You promised when you became Prime Minister to cut NHS waiting lists. Have they gone up or down since you made that pledge?
I've been very clear. We have not made as much progress on NHS waiting lists as I would have liked, and they have risen.
They've gone up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are now coming down. And after we've got through the industrial action and resolved it with all parts of the NHS workforce except the junior doctors, what you have seen over the past few months is now the waiting lists are starting to fall by about.
I mean, you're absolutely right. It is this weird trolley problem that the Conservative Party have been stuck in, they've stuck themselves in specifically, is that they could inconvenience the people who donate to the party to be able to protect the votes of the demographic that they need to win elections, their core voting demographic, which is the elderly. And instead of taxing the rich who fund them to be able to put enough capex into the NHS, for example, or into some kind of social care plan that would help protect those who are elderly, who might need access to good healthcare and good social care, they've gone, nope, can't be arsed with that. Tax cuts very, very slightly, even though taxes are already going up because of fiscal drag, but no taxes on the rich. It doesn't matter if we lose the election, our donors are literally more important. And now even elderly people are jumping ship to Labour and Reform UK. This is how much of an electoral bungling the Tories are making of the last 5 years, off of a giant mandate for fiscal expansion and an investment-led economy, for investment-led growth. They jettisoned the Prime Minister who promised those things, put in the austerity Chancellor Mark II, Jeremy Hunt, and the worst political campaigner in living memory.
About 200,000 over the past few months. And if we stick to that plan, we can make more progress.
Isn't the problem with that argument, though? Waiting lists haven't just gone up under Rishi Sunak. They went up under Liz Truss. They went up under Boris Johnson. They went up under Theresa May. They went up under David Cameron. Conservative prime ministers for 14 years, long before COVID, long before strikes, have put NHS waiting lists.
Again, because the problem was austerity. These problems were created by lack of capital investment from George Osborne. And you know what? I do kind of feel sorry for Rishi Sunak that he's had to pick up the pieces from where the entirety of our public sector was hollowed out and destroyed deliberately by George Osborne. Like, healthcare spending is higher than it's been in a very long time under Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt. But, they were in positions to be able to oppose this beforehand, and they never did. They've voted through all the austerity budgets, like from 2015 onwards in Rishi Sunak's case, to take money out of the NHS and to keep those waiting lists going up. Things like the Lansley reforms that were never reversed, all of that creeping privatisation, all of these failed hacking apart of the NHS under Conservative Party dogma. And that's, the thick end of the wedge that they're now dealing with. It's all blowing up in their face. And Rishi Sunak is the person who really has been left holding the bag of 14 years of incompetence, at the very least 10 years of incompetence with the NHS. And on top of that, huge amounts of public money spaffed away on crony contracts, which is the direct result of him being Chancellor of the Exchequer during that period, which was wasted money that could have been spent much better on the NHS if it was done in-house. Whilst I will say that Rishi Sunak is unlucky to have to deal with the poor preparation for the pandemic, he was also there
neoliberalism
during the pandemic when he was the one giving out crony contracts. Like, everybody's failed, but he has been left holding the bag from all of the austerity failures of Osborne and Hammond.
The NHS is undeniably been under pressure for a while. That was exacerbated by what happened in the pandemic. I think most reasonable people can see that. But this election is about the future. It's where do we go from here? And as I said, we're investing record sums in the NHS, recruiting and training more doctors and nurses, and doing things innovatively. For example, expanding the range of services that people can go and see their pharmacist for. And I'm the son of a pharmacist and a GP, so it's something I grew up with. And what we are doing is saying,
Yeah, exactly. Like, he keeps running on saying, well, actually, if you look at our record, we helped people out by protecting jobs during the pandemic. And I'm like, yeah, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, you had to be forced to do furlough by Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, because he didn't want to be unpopular. He was so committed to neoliberalism that the idea of protecting people during a global pandemic was anathema to you, and he had to get railroaded into it by the narcissist.
if you've got a sore throat or an ear infection now, you don't need to get the GP appointment for you or your kids. You can go straight to your pharmacist and get the medicines that you need. That's an example of making care faster for people, and it will make a difference. Now, of course, it will take time to recover from the pandemic, but we are now on the right track.
I think the worry people have when they look at that record is they think it's all right for Conservative leaders. What they can do is go private, pay, and skip the queue.
I come from an NHS family. So my dad was a...
That's really good framing as well, because it is skipping the queue. It's not expanding the access, because it's all the same pool of mostly the same healthcare workers and brick and mortar capacity. It is just skipping the queue if you go private.
GP. My mum was a pharmacist.
You
I was
private
surrounded...
healthcare.
Yes, I have done.
Oh, well, but was your dad a toolmaker, though? That's the good question.
But I also use the NHS and rely on the NHS, as do my kids. But at the end of the day, I was raised in an NHS family surrounded by people who dedicated their lives to the NHS, talking at home about what more they could do to look after their patients. And that's how I think about the NHS today, which is why, as I said, we're backing it with record funding and more doctors and nurses. And now, as you can see, we are bringing the waiting list down after what has been a difficult period.
Forgive me interrupting. We've got a lot to get through in our half hour or so. You want to talk about immigration. You said you did at the beginning, and you promised to control our borders. But the number of people arriving here legally under the new immigration rules introduced after Brexit, and you campaigned vigorously for Brexit, reached a record high. Last year, 685,000 extra people came here. That's twice the population of Coventry. You didn't control our borders, did you?
No, the numbers are too high. I've been very clear about that. But people can judge me as well on what I've done as Prime Minister, where I've put in place biggest, strictest reforms to bring down immigration that we've seen. what the forecasts now show is that the levels of net migration are due to halve over the next 12 months or so. The number of visas that we issued at the beginning of this year is down already by a quarter. So that shows we're now on the.
And again, it's also kind of unfair that Rishi Sunak's holding this bag as well, because the visa expansion was a problem of Boris Johnson's creation. Before the election, even in 2019, they changed, for example, the student visa rule to give people more time in the UK and to bring families over. Like, that's a Boris Johnson policy under the auspices of making global Britain a place where anybody can come and make a living. Something that I agree with. I agree with Boris Johnson on this. And of course, the pandemic happened and net migration massively stopped because borders were closed. And so people who were waiting during that year all came at the same time in one massive kind of glut of people in 22-23. And then this number of 700,000 comes up about this total net migration that includes people who otherwise would have come before the pandemic started. And then this has been thrust onto Rishi Sunak again. Like, look how massive the net migration is for legal migration. I'm like, that figure only tells like a certain amount of the story. And again, he wasn't the one who drove that policy either. I think it was a good policy. I think it is good that people come here to live and work and that we increase the working age population of this country. But that wasn't the mandate he was elected on.
Right track. And if I'm re-elected, what we will introduce is a legal cap on migration that parliamentarians will vote on every year, so that not just will we halve the levels of net migration, we will continue to reduce them year on year.
Here's the
And
problem
that's
Rishi
the
Sunak
choice
says,
of this election.
I promised to control immigration. Haven't done it yet, but I promise I will. But every single Prime Minister for 14 years under the Conservatives, they would reduce immigration.
Well,
David Cameron didn't do it.
Well,
Theresa
Nick,
May didn't do
that's
it.
not-
Boris Johnson didn't do it. Liz Truss didn't do it. And now Rishi Sunak
It's not
hasn't done
quite
it.
right what you said. Actually, we've just had the numbers for last year, so the first full year that I was Prime Minister. It showed that net migration was down 10% from the levels that I inherited. And this year so far, the number of visas that we've issued in the main categories is down by a quarter because of the reforms that I've brought in.
Massively
So-
higher than the promise that was originally made when the
But
Conservatives
you
were
said,
elected.
well, your point to me was that I hadn't done anything about it. That's not right. I've instituted reforms that last year meant the numbers were down by 10%, as we've seen, but this year the number of visas issued are down by a quarter. The forecasts are now for net migration to halve. And again, yes, that's the past. This election's about the future. I've got a clear plan with a legal migration cap to guarantee that the numbers continue falling.
I understand, Woody Red. I understand that people don't want more immigration. Like, I disagree with them, and I'm going to make the case as to why I disagree with them. But people aren't being truthful with the population, which is either accept more immigration, or have more children, or accept an economy that stops functioning. It's as simple as that. Like, your living standards will go down, or we'll have more immigrants, or you'll have a higher birth rate. This is not something where you can choose everything. You can't have your cake and eat it with this. Again, I will invoke Thomas Sowell on this as well. I am reticent to invoke such a man, but there's one point of his that I always go back to because I know that rightoids can't argue if I do, which is that economics is always about trade-offs and you can't make everybody happy all of the time. Whatever choice you make in one sector will have ramifications elsewhere. And this is a choice that you're going to have to make. Either reduce immigration and have a worse economy unless you increase birth rates. This is this triangle of problems here that you cannot solve all of these problems at the same time.
Labour have not matched that. They don't have any plan to bring the numbers down and indeed oppose the measures that I've already taken. And that's the choice facing people on migration at this election.
It's a choice that depends on people giving you more time to deliver what you're saying. You promised you'd stop the boats. So far this year, more than 11,000 people have crossed the channel, record high. You've not stopped the boats. Why do you deserve more time to try to do it?
Because from the first time that small boats became a phenomenon a few years ago, we got the numbers down last year by a third. That had never happened before. Everyone, when I got this job, said to me, you won't be able to do anything about this problem. Well, because of our plan, we've got the numbers down by a third last
Now
year.
they're going back up again. You've got a record number this year.
But if we stick to our plan, we will continue to bring them down. Why? Because if I'm re-elected as Prime Minister, we will get flights off to Rwanda and establish a deterrent. So very simply, my view that illegal migration is unfair, and the only way to fully solve this problem is for people to know that if they come to our country illegally, they won't be able to stay. And that means we have to have somewhere safe to return them. And if I'm Prime Minister, the flights will go, the deterrent will be built.
But why not wait, Prime Minister? You say the flights will go to Rwanda. You say they'll go in just a few weeks' time. You had the opportunity to prove it. You could have said to everybody, here are the flights. People have gone to Rwanda. Here's the deterrent. The numbers are falling. You didn't. You cut and run. You had the election before. And now we have to take it on trust.
Well, no, because as I said, we got the numbers down by a third last year. That had never happened
How
before.
many people have gone to Rwanda in the 3 years since you announced that you would do this?
because it's taken time to get this through Parliament because we've been
None is the
frustrated.
answer.
Yes, and that this election's about the future, and there's a clear choice, Nick. If you believe, like I do, the only way to solve this problem is to have a deterrent, we're the only party that can deliver that for you. And again, the Labour Party have no answer. At the debate the other week, I asked...
I mean, again, you can open up safe and legal routes. We don't necessarily need a deterrent. We don't necessarily need to deter these people if we have safe and legal routes so we can process the claims and then accept them, or we can reject them on the merits of those cases. In case of regular migration, for example, it is you who explicitly will rule that out in favour of a deterrent that you can't pass through Parliament. You've then made immigration and irregular migration, for example, you've made this a central issue to your campaign, and it's something that you've failed on, and you're now surprised that Reform UK and Nigel Farage are picking votes off you. Like, you wanted this. You wanted everyone to talk about stopping the boats. You haven't stopped the boats, and now Nigel Farage is 1 point behind you. Like, fucking GG, Rishi, it's your own fault, mate.
Ask Keir Starmer, what would the Labour Party do with migrants who come to our country illegally? Time after time, he couldn't answer the question. Now, I have a plan. People may not all agree with it, but it is a clear plan that, by the way, almost 20 other European countries now agree is the right approach to dealing with this problem.
But
And if
forgive me, when you say you've
elected,
got a
that
plan,
deterrent will be built.
You sound to me like a guy in a pub who borrows 50 quid, and he borrowed it 3 years ago, and he keeps saying, don't worry, I'll pay you back. And then when you confront him in the pub, he says, I'll pay you tomorrow. You wouldn't believe him, would you? You constantly promising what you will do, but what you haven't done so far.
We got the numbers down by a third last year. That had never happened before. Never, ever. The numbers had just gone up and up and up until I became Prime Minister. The numbers were down by a third last year, so people can trust me. We've got a plan. The airfield is on standby. The planes are booked. Migrants have been detained. The caseworkers are working. And if I'm Prime Minister, the flights will go. We will build that deterrent. And then that's how we will stop the boats. And again, there is no answer from the Labour Party as to what they will do with illegal migrants. And that's the choice at this
I will
election.
put that to Sir Keir Starmer.
Whoa. No answer. They've said they're going to smash the criminal gangs with a special border force. How's that going to work? Dunno. But that's what they've said. That's about as much detail as you're getting from Labour Party policy right now anyway.
When he is in that chair. Now, we've talked about your promises, and we've heard that not all of them have been delivered. Now, ever since this election was called, we've had endless promises. I've got all your Tory press releases here. Promise of national service, couple of billion there. A promise for a tax cut for pensioners. A promise of a tax cut for parents. More apprenticeship, more police officers. Endless promises of more and more money from the Conservatives. Have you found the magic money tree?
No, every single one of those policies that you've just been through is fully funded and costed, as is explained in every single one of those press releases, as indeed when we set out our manifesto tomorrow, people will be able to see all the details behind it even further.
And tomorrow you'll promise more tax cuts.
We will have a manifesto tomorrow that builds on all the things that you've just gone through, that we've already announced in this campaign, that yes, does continue to cut people's taxes, because I believe in a country where people's hard work is rewarded. And there's a clear choice in contrast at this election. Our party, the Conservatives, are promising and will deliver tax cuts, building on the tax cuts that we have already started to deliver, and have ruled out tax rises. That's not what the Labour Party are doing. They are being open that some taxes are going to go up, but what they're not telling everyone is that...
I mean, they have not said that any taxes are going to go up. That's what they've explicitly not said. They've ruled out any tax rises. They're going to increase eligibility for existing taxes, i.e. they're going to make private schools eligible for a taxable status. They are making sure that non-doms are now eligible for taxation. But the rate of any of these taxes isn't going up. One tax rise that Labour are lying about, though, which they are increasing, is income tax, because they are keeping fiscal drag, which is an income tax rise in real terms. The rate may not be changing, but the amount...
Fucking neoliberalism.
But the amount that you're paying in real terms as a proportion of your income is going to be increasing with fiscal drag. But of course, Rishi Sunak can't attack the Labour Party for keeping fiscal drag, because that's their policy. They instituted the fiscal drag in the first place, and they are also promising to maintain that fiscal drag moving forward as well.
There is a £2,000 tax bill waiting for working families across our country if they are elected,
figure,
and
maybe.
that is the choice
We'll come
for
to that
people.
disputed figure maybe in a second. You say that you're cutting taxes. You've got a bit of a nerve, haven't you? Under Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor and then Prime Minister, the total tax bill in this country has gone up by £93 billion a year. That's even more than Jeremy Corbyn wants to put on people.
And as you and I have discussed many times, Nick, what's happened in that period? We were hit by a once-in-a-century pandemic and then an energy crisis. The government rightly stepped in at both of
And
those
if I'm
moments to
going to
provide
live
an enormous
rent-free in
amount of
his
support
head-
to people, to families, with their energy bills, with furlough, the NHS. That was the right thing to do. And of course, it's difficult, but
And if I'm
right
going
to
to
make sure
live
that we pay that
rent-free in
back.
his
And you're
That's why.
still paying
That's
it
why
back.
the
If you
tax
get into
burden.
power,
Can I just
income tax will
can
still
I
go
continue?
up
Can I answer your
year
question?
in, year
Let me
out
just.
for the
Can I
next
just
few
finish
years.
answering a question? So the context is important.
Shut
I'm
up,
not going to shy
Wesley.
away from what happened. I did make those difficult decisions because that's right for the financial security of our country. But now taxes are being.
They were right to have a bunch of tax increases given the state of the finances and what happened during the pandemic and post-Ukraine, right? Not unreasonable for them to want to put taxes up a little bit to ensure that any new money they created was taken out of the system to control inflation, for example. These things entirely reasonable for them to do. And people in this country are not averse to paying taxes. They don't mind paying taxes at all, as long as they get something in return. Did they get anything in return? No. Michelle Mone got a yacht in return. Millions were spaffed away into the pockets of Serco and G4S in return. We have no assets to show for it. Our country is worse off because of it, and our public sector is even more emaciated because of it. This is the issue. Like, people don't mind paying tax. They just hate the idea that their tax money is being spent poorly, even though that's not necessarily how government funding works, because the government spends the money and then taxes it back. But even so, they want to know the government is spending money in a way that makes our country better off, and they did the opposite. They did the total opposite. And again, if they'd bothered engaging in like a proper investment-led economy, we wouldn't be in this mess.
The average tax rate faced by a typical person in work is the lowest it has been in over half a century. So yes, you're right about the overall tax burden, but for someone in work, an ordinary average worker, today, they face the lowest average tax rate that they have faced in over half a century
Taxes,
because of
Prime
what we
Minister,
have done.
are going
And
up.
we've already
Let me just
started,
make this
Nick,
point,
with a
because you
£900 tax cut this year.
Income tax going up this year. Income tax going up next year. Income tax going up the next year. Year after year after year, you are increasing the income tax.
Nick,
Are people watching this programme, but you come in interviews and say, cutting your tax.
Nick, the facts are very clear, and I'm sure your team will be able to provide them for you. Right now, with all the changes, because there's lots of changes that go on in a system, right now, an average worker is facing the lowest tax rate on their earnings that they have seen in this country for over 50 years.
You're talking about the tax rate, Prime Minister, which is very convenient for you because it's thresholds.
No, it combines.
matter,
No,
not
no,
just-
Nick. No,
Let
Nick.
me-
That
let me make the
combines.
point and then you come
Nick,
back
no,
at
no,
me.
no. It
Make the
combines
point.
thresholds and the rate.
Forgive me, for
the
people-
effective tax rate taken together for an average.
Wow, Rishi's getting angry. Again, this is why he comes off so poorly, because he looks incredibly angry when he gets questioned. Like, he's getting visibly frustrated here, which I find quite funny. And I'm not sure until we see more of this clip whether or not he's being truthful here. But just this level to which that he will talk over people and look belligerent and petulant under being put under any amount of scrutiny. Again, very much a case of Winchester Boys' School, public school boy, never faced any public scrutiny before in his life, suddenly getting tetchy at the idea that maybe he isn't mummy's perfect little boy, that he isn't mummy's perfect little boy, that he isn't like the head boy prefect type. Hate to bring down the tone of the discussion, but I really just despise these public schoolboy people. Yeah, angry man in a suit. The bottom 40% and the top 30% of workers are paying more, the middle are paying less. Yeah, exactly. Like, was it the 35k to 50k brackets saw an overall drop in tax, but fiscal drag has meant that everybody outside of that range is still paying more. I think I remember that's how that works out broadly.
Average worker today, combining thresholds and the rate, is the lowest it has been in over 50 years. And when we finish this interview, your team will be able to show you that. I will be able to show
And
you
I
it
will
as well.
tell you that
And that's
somebody on the
reality of
minimum
it.
wage loses much more money from the change, from
Nick,
the freezing of income tax thresholds.
Nick,
than they gain.
someone on the national living wage is this year seeing an £1,800 increase in their wages because of what this Conservative government has done. The proportion of people on low pay in this country is the lowest it has been since the records began.
Let's just check a
So we
fact.
have disproportionately made sure that those on the lowest incomes are seeing their wages rise the fastest under this Conservative government, as well as cutting taxes for everyone in work. That is what we are doing.
You've made
And the problem he says under this Conservative government, right? Sure, since the last election, we've had more wage rises than we've had for the entirety of the last 14 years because of the case of what happened post-pandemic, the tight labour market, the interest rate staying low until the very last minute to ensure that we had economic recovery coming out of the pandemic. And that's not wrong. But this is still some wage increases after, a decade of wage stagnation beforehand under Osborne and Hammond, right? Like, again, you've got to defend your entire record in government as a party, not just try and act like the Osborne and Hammond years just never existed, Rishi.
Your point. 3.7 million more people will pay income tax for the first time because of your policies. 2.7 million extra people will pay higher rate tax because of your policies. So you are increasing some taxes, income tax in particular, while you're cutting national insurance. So let's turn to the Labour Party. You've got a bit of a nerve, haven't you, having a go at the Labour Party? You've raised our taxes by record amounts, £93 billion. You produce some figures, criticised by the boss of the Treasury, criticised by the chair of the UK Statistics Authority, criticised by the former head of the civil service. And yet you come to this interview and you repeat something that you said that they all think is misleading.
Because it's right. And the choice of this election is clear. We are going to keep cutting people's taxes. You'll see that in our manifesto tomorrow. You've seen it in the announcements that we've already made. Labour Party are going to put people's taxes up. We have been through their policies.
Independent Treasury officials had costed Labour policies. Yes. Independent Treasury officials didn't produce that figure that you keep repeating.
So there are 27 policies, as the letter from the Permanent Secretary.
Did they produce that figure, Prime Minister?
Let me explain. There are 27 different policies that underpin that figure. Of those 27, 21 are produced by independent Treasury officials, available online for people to see. 3 come from other government sources.
And they literally told you not to use it, Rishi. This is, again, and this was like over the entirety of the Parliament, so it works out at like £400, even if it were true, which it isn't. And again, this is the assumption that, A, all of the money they're spending is going to come from tax rises and not from fiscal expansion, because, of course, some policies that people propose will come from new money, whether that is created by the Bank of England or by issuing bonds. These are both things that you can do to spend money in government rather than spending the money that comes in or out, because it's not indeed a household budget. No matter how much people try and tell you that it is, you can indeed spend new money on government spending. So it's not necessarily going to be tax rises, even if there is a gap in what they say they'll spend and what they're not going to spend. And on top of that, this £400 a year extra in taxes that you're mythically making up that Labour are going to be putting onto people doesn't necessarily have to come out of the pockets of ordinary working people if it was even true. It could come out of capital gains tax. It could come from a wealth tax. It could come from a financial services tax or a tax on share buybacks like the Liberal Democrats are proposing. There are loads of different avenues that this could go down. But this idea that you just take the entire cost of a policy, divide that by the number of taxpayers in the country and go, yep, that's how much it's going to cost everybody, misunderstands A, the tax system, and B, the nature of government spending. But of course, we've been lied to for so long that government spending is like a household budget, that people can't critique this in good faith.
Sources, 2 come from the Labour Party themselves, and 1 comes from an independent investment bank. Every single one of them is available, transparent, and you top them all up, and it amounts to £2,000 worth of tax rises for every working family in our country.
Yeah, when you say top them all up, what you mean is when Tory researchers top them all up, treat 4 years of figures as if it's 1 year, divide it between all the families, which no economist would ever do. You then produce a Conservative press release, and you claim that it's been produced by the Treasury when it hasn't. It's a Conservative figure.
Let's go through it again, Nick.
No,
there are 27. There are 27.
Something else.
Well, no, but you've made a point which isn't right. There are 27 figures.
Again, this is a real car crash, isn't it? Get shown all of the failures of 14 years of Conservative government. Just the failures of all of that period, just laid out in front of him, to which he has no answer other than just, we are going to do things, please trust us. And then gets into like this kind of bitch argument, this kind of bitch fight with, that's a probably pretty sexist way of putting it, but he gets into this kind of shouting match with Nick Robinson over lies that he's told that he definitely 100% believes and that everybody knows is complete nonsense. He just looks terrible. Oh God, he looks so bad. It's, genuine car crash. I mean, to be fair, when was the last time Rishi Sunak did an interview and it wasn't a car crash? He couldn't even handle loose women without looking like an idiot.
27 policies, 21 of them are costed by the Treasury, 2 of them are from the Labour Party themselves, 3 from government sources, and 1 from an independent investment bank.
Okay.
You top them all up, divide by the number of households, and that's how you get £2,094 for every working family in our country.
Again, divided by every household. That's not how taxes work, Rishi. And of course he knows this.
And I don't want to see that happen. And that is what the Labour Party will do.
Yeah, okay.
That's what a future Labour government has got in store. By the way,
let's not run out of time, Robbins. We've other things to talk about. You've made your point. You think it's valid. I put to you that other people do not think it's valid. I will ask Keir Starmer about his tax plans when he's here in a little while.
Well, I noticed
Aren't
his
you
spokesman
honest?
today has ruled out yet again, has been refused to rule out tax rises yet again today.
Now, you've also said in the past, you said it on the steps of Downing Street, I'll always be honest with you, you said, about what is needed, even when that is difficult. Will you be honest with people tonight and say, my government will have to, given my plans, cut spending by a significant amount in many government departments?
No, that's not what our plans show. And indeed, public spending will continue to grow.
It absolutely does show that. It absolutely does show that. Because even the money that you've kind of cobbled together from these kind of fantasy figures around things like welfare efficiency savings, or from closing the tax gap that you should have closed 14 years ago, even those figures only pay for the current round of other tax cuts that you're promising as a giveaway to the electorate. That doesn't take into account the £18 billion of public sector cuts outside of ring-fenced departments that the IFS have already identified that neither you nor the Labour Party seem willing to acknowledge.
It will continue to be at record levels. It will continue to grow ahead of inflation. That's what our plans have
Total
set up.
government spending. If you spend, as you're promising...
No,
Do you
Nick.
want me to go through all your press releases? If you spend more and more, what we know is that you will spend less on certain departments. The head of the Office for Budget Responsibility described government spending plans as a work of fiction. The Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies said you might have to cut £18 billion a year. That's the equivalent of every police force in England and Wales.
And I hate to just run Labour's lines for them, but it's true. What happened last time you ignored the OBR, Rishi? Do you remember what happened to the economy as it was felt by your target voter base of pensioners and mortgage holders? Didn't go well, did it?
You're going to have to cut in certain areas, aren't you?
No.
No
because
areas. No
because
cuts.
day-to-day public spending, you said overall government spending, actually day-to-day spending on government services under a future Conservative government will continue to increase ahead of inflation. Now, of course, all governments prioritise within that, but what we'd also want to focus on is productivity. Right now, the government is spending more of everyone else's money than it has in a very, very long time. Productivity in the public sector has fallen considerably since COVID. And if we recover just the pre-COVID levels of productivity, so nothing heroic, just as productive as we were before the pandemic hit, you mentioned a figure, that productivity gain is worth £20 billion. So yes, I'm not going to apologise for finding more efficiencies in the public sector, which, by the way, they were performing at just...
And again, where are you going to find this extra productivity from? Again, lots of this is due to the retention crisis and the staffing crises in the public sector. Something, again, that you could have done something about before now, and you haven't. And also lack of capital investment. People to talk about technology and the NHS. Why haven't you done it? It's going to cost you money to do that investment, which will boost productivity. This idea that suddenly public sector workers just stopped working hard in the last 3 years specifically, this is nonsensical.
Just a few years ago, so that we don't have to raise people's taxes and we can continue to cut them.
Yes.
And that figure is also something that the independent controllers have pointed to as an opportunity for efficiency
Here's
savings.
the difficulty with what you're saying. You're saying to the public, you can have all these goodies, we'll cut your taxes, we'll unveil more tax cuts in our manifesto. Nothing in spending has to be cut. That's all increasing at all. You're sounding very like Liz Truss, aren't you?
No, not at all, actually, because every one of those policies is paid essentially by two things. One is tax avoidance and evasion, which on average over the last 14 years has raised £6.7 billion a year. We're only assuming that we continue to raise 6, so it's a conservative estimate, and the remainder of the savings come from a reform to the welfare system. Welfare is currently growing at an...
And again, you've already said that is going to be allocated elsewhere. That's what the OBR has said. That's why they called you doing fantasy economics. That they're works of fiction. Again, this has already been allocated.
Unsustainable rate. We've set out a comprehensive plan to reform it, to support people into work. Just return things back to pre-pandemic levels would save £30 billion when it comes to...
Yeah, it turns out after a pandemic, things change, especially in terms of welfare payments to people on long-term sick. Sick because of the whole coronavirus thing. You keep talking about it as being your excuse for why the economy is bad, that you seem to forget that it ever has existed when it comes to things like payments for people on long-term sickness or lack of workforce employment rate.
Ill health. We're not assuming anything like that. Just £12 billion, and those two things will pay for all the things that we've just been through.
I want to ask you about one other policy area, which has been raised by many of our viewers. It's housing. Many people are forced, even in their 30s, to live at home with mum and dad. They simply can't afford the rent, let alone afford to buy a house. Having your own home has got harder under a Conservative government.
It has got harder and I want to make sure that it's easier. And what we will do is not just build homes in the right places and do that in a way that is sensitive to local communities, but make sure that we support young people into great jobs so they can save for that deposit. And I'm going to go back to tax because it is important.
Even great jobs do not earn you a deposit, Rishi. You need to build more houses. You need to stop prioritising current homeowners over people who want to be able to get onto the housing ladder. Normal working people, even regardless of whether or not they're in high-paid jobs or not, they still can't afford to get on the housing ladder. A, because prices are so sky high after all of the extra liquidity that got pumped in, that getting a deposit together is impossible for those who aren't on like the top 5% or top 10% of incomes. And unless you're part of that income bracket to begin with, you're not going to pass an affordability test for a mortgage after mortgage rates have gone up. Like, yeah, it's not a demand side issue, yeah.
No,
You're talking about people who, like you, had the money to buy a home. Most young people are
and
not
I want
worrying about
everyone-
the deposit. They're not worrying about stamp duty.
Actually-
they don't want another tax cut. They can't afford to leave the home of mum and dad.
No, actually, when I speak to people, it is the deposit that is the biggest challenge because many people earn enough to cover a mortgage payment, but the struggle is saving up for a deposit. That has always, over the last few years, been the number one challenge. But what will make it harder is saddling young people with higher tax.
Things they also can't afford to move out their parents' houses because the rental market is screwed over as well. It's weird how this hasn't been mentioned. Like, of course, there's the Renters Reform Bill that kind of got junked halfway through in terms of the important parts of the policy to protect renters. And they're not increasing supply of, say, council housing to bring rents down. They're not doing anything to protect renters. So people who can't afford to rent are living at home with their parents, and people who don't have parents to live at home with can barely afford to live because the rents are so high. Again, and people wonder why Rishi Sunak seems out of touch with the real world. And this isn't just a young person issue. There are plenty of people in their 40s and 50s even who from less well-off backgrounds who've never been able to afford a deposit to get onto the housing ladder because they haven't had the bank of mum and dad to rely on. Like plenty of people who were slightly better off have been able to manage with the bank of mum and dad to help them onto the housing ladder, but don't have a mum and dad to live with, so they are stuck paying extortionate sky-high rents, will never be able to move out ever, and won't even have a proper pension at the end of this because the state pension's still pretty bad in this country, even with all of the quadruple, quintuple, dodecahedral locks or whatever you want to put on top of it. Plus, you screwed over private pensions as well because of the Liz Truss mini budget. Like, this is the whole country has been screwed up, young people especially, but even older people who were in the poor sector of the public who have never been able to afford a mortgage because these have been incredibly expensive for at least the last 25 years. Completely living in a different universe, a different reality to everybody else. And this comes from me. I did have help getting onto the housing ladder. I don't have to experience or what everybody else is feeling in the rental market, or those who are finding it difficult to get into the housing ladder because of mortgage affordability assessments and because of high deposit rates. I didn't have to worry about that. And even I know that shit is fucked for those who aren't in the privileged position that I'm in.
I think people working hard should keep more of their money. No young person is going to find it any easier to buy the home that I want them to have to fulfil those aspirations if they're saddled with £2,000 worth of higher taxes from the Labour Party.
Now, Prime Minister, we've gone through lots of policy. There's lots of other policy we could have talked about.
No, not even a challenge there. And again, £2,000 over 5 years? It's not even true. But even if it was true, that extra £2,000 over 5 years, oh, great. Well, that means in 25 years' time, all of that money I will have saved with the Conservative Party will have me for a deposit for a house that will be more expensive in 25 years' time anyway. Cheers, Rishi. Appreciate you. Great governance there. Thanks a lot.
There'll be other opportunities to do that. But I want to close by asking you whether you really think the Conservatives deserve another 5 years in power. Many viewers have told us, they've got in touch with the BBC and says, nothing works in this country. You can't get a GP appointment, you can't get to dentist, you can't afford somewhere to live, the trains don't run on time, sewage get pumped into the rivers and the sea. Why do you deserve another chance?
Well, we haven't got time to go over all the things of the last 14 years. I point out one thing which you failed to mention on your list, thanks to the conservative education reforms, our children in this country are not just the best readers in the
It is very funny, like, he's done it in every interview. People will say to him, what about all of these problems that your party is responsible for? And he'll go, we could talk about those, or we could talk about this something that's slightly less important than the fact that we are literally pumping actual shit into the rivers. Have you not heard that we have 10-year-olds who are reading good? By one study that is contestable with a bunch of other studies that say different things. That's definitely more important. Not saying it's not important. That's definitely more important than, you know, the entire NHS collapsing and literal, actual, physical shit in the rivers. Yeah, the education claim is disputable at the very least, yeah. Yeah, your children may read good, but they're going home hungry because we've not done free school meals. The housing crisis means their parents can't afford to put food on their table and they're having to go to food banks. First world country, everybody. First world country, 7th richest country in the world, folks. It's going well.
The UK, they're the best readers in the Western world. We've transformed possibilities for young people because of our education reforms, but this election is about the future. And we have been through a tough few years, that's undeniable, but I believe we've turned the corner now. And that this election is about building on the progress that we've made, delivering a secure future for everyone, where their taxes are cut, their pensions are protected, migration is coming down, and we get to net zero in a more sensible way. That's what I offer at this election. I'm prepared to take bold action. I've got a clear plan to deliver that. And in contrast, the Labour Party are asking for a blank cheque. They won't tell you what they're going to spend it on, and they won't tell you which of your taxes are going to go up to pay for it. And that is the choice at this election.
After 14 years, 5 prime ministers, Boris Johnson lying about parties, Liz Truss almost crashing the economy, and you bunking off D-Day, after all the broken promises, you really think you deserve another chance?
I've been very clear in the past, no government gets everything right, but I am proud of what has been achieved over 14 years.
Yeah, true, no government gets everything right, but very few of them break the rules that they set everybody else. Very few of them do that specifically. Like, come on, mate. No government is perfect, but when you're faced with just a litany of all of your failures, you just go like,
literally a communist.
whoopsie, shit in the rivers, ooh, my bad. Child poverty is sky high. Promise we'll do better next time. Nah, mate, clear off, grab your coat.
This election is also about the future. We have a clear plan. I'm prepared to take bold action to cut people's taxes, protect their pensions, and bring migration down. And in contrast, Labour are just going to put everyone's taxes up. That's a choice.
Prime Minister,
You are a liar.
Rishi Sunak,
Thank you for having me.
thank you for joining me.
Wow, that was embarrassing. Jesus. I knew he was bad at this, but I didn't think it was going to be quite that bad. Like, we've watched a fair few terrible interviews with Rishi Sunak on this channel. This absolutely has to be the worst. That has to be the worst the Rishi Sunak interview that we've watched. Like, and it wasn't even necessarily, like, particularly forceful questioning by Nick Robinson. He let him off of a couple of things, and he still got railroaded and looked like an absolute cart horse. And yeah, it's just incredibly unlikable. That is the one thing that you take away from a Rishi Sunak interview, as well as obviously all the failure, all the crappy policy. He's just incredibly unlikable. And I say that, again, as somebody who is also very unlikable as well. So, you know, it takes one to know one, right, Rishi? Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.